Wow, that was cool. I felt like it was happening right inside my head.
I think it was inside our head.
Nice. Right, what next?
Well, we've done places. Let's try education now.
Well, it's pretty obvious where we go now, isn't it?
Of course, the chip shop.
The chip shop? Okay, I get it. Humour. Well done.
All right, Mrs. Sarcastic, let's get going. We need to look at the map to find the sign.
Righto, let's have a look.
Let's split up. Call me if you find it. Well, I think we know what's going to happen next.
To infinity and beyond.
I was interviewed by an inspector from Staffordshire in Burton at the old Guild Street offices, and he said, you will have a job somewhere in Staffordshire in September, but I don't know where. And then 2 weeks later I had a phone call one morning at 9:10 from Mr. Hayton, who was the head then, to say, can you come round to the school, lass? And I rushed round thinking there was a problem with my children because I'd just dropped them off, and he said, I've got a job going in the reception class, would you like it?
Well, Mr. Hayton rang me up, and at the time I was helping Will Fisher out at the post office, delivering papers, because I was at home, and I went to the school with his paper, and he came out on his bicycle to go and put a notice in the post office window, asking for somebody to work. And he said, oh, I no need to go my ride. He said, how about you coming and working at school? And that was at the old school.
When I first started, there were only 3 of us in the school. There was me, a Miss Naden, I was the reception, she was the next teacher, and Joy Rowe. And we were the only ones because it was just the infants, Key Stage 2, or the juniors as they were then, were all up at the old school.
I was there for 8 years, and they built this new school. And Mr. Hayton said, Mrs. Greenleaf, you can apply for the cook's job. And I said, oh, no. He said, oh, yes, you can. He says, there's applications and you can go. And I said, oh, I don't know so much about that.
I think we did everything that we do now, but we weren't so prescriptive, and we were led by the children's needs. We weren't being pushed by government or by outside agencies who were just dealing with figures.
And at the time it was Mrs. Coates was a governor, and what's that, Anderson, Peggy Anderson's husband. And then there was all the people from Stafford that interviewed me, and there was 7 of us had to get interviewed. There wasn't just me.
Mr. Hayton was the first head. He was a very bluff Yorkshireman, and he called because it was only ladies who worked there. Mr. Shear was at the junior school, but he called us all lass. And he was a very plain-speaking man. He actually said to me one day, I'd been doing some work with the reception class, and we were doing subtraction because we'd done addition and they were getting quite good. And when he saw now it was a record book rather than a focus book in those, a forecast book. So you wrote down what you had done that week. And I put that I'd been doing subtraction, and I was called into his office at the end of the week. And he said, right, lass, he said, I noticed you've been doing subtraction with them. I said, yes. He said, don't push them too far, they're only babies.
I could name a lot of them. My favourite teacher was Mrs. Jacks, which I believe went on to teach you, I think, as well. Did she teach you?
Don't remember.
Mrs.
No, not Mrs. Jacks. I don't think she was there.
Mr. Eastham and Mr. Sheffield. Mr. Sheffield was the first teacher that I'd ever seen with a beard.
And I had to go to Stafford for 7 weeks, every day, backwards and forwards to Stafford, to get my sitting guilds, you see, to take over at the school. And then they built the school. Well, the school was being built while I was doing that, and
We didn't see him very much. He never came out of his room, never came into the staff room, didn't do assemblies. He was a whiz with a screwdriver if something fell off the wall. But basically, it was him and us.
Mr. Hayton used to always, he was the headmaster when I was at the primary school. Mr. Hayton used to always wear a very small grey jacket, and it was always like cut off at this point, but he could never quite get it done up because he was quite a large gentleman. And the jacket actually, it looked more like a work overall. Perhaps if he worked in I won't say a butcher's, but it was a strange thing. That's all he ever wore. I can remember that about him.
First dinner at Oriel's new school was roast lamb, because this is what I did for my test at Stafford, because you had to have a test at Stafford. I had roast lamb, roast potatoes, boiled potatoes, cabbage and gravy, and they had apple tart and custard.
When he decided to retire because he said education was going in a direction he didn't go into it for. And so he and his wife retired at the same time. And the governors, I was a governor then, and we decided to get Delise Sanders, who still lives in Mill End Lane, who was an artist, to do a picture for him. We commissioned a painting of all of us, and he refused to accept it because he said, I don't want any fuss. He said, I just want to go.
There was 5 of them in the kitchen under me. Well, they'd never been in the kitchen before, so of course I got to learn them what to do as well. So it was a bit hard the first month.
We had a very different head then called Mrs. Morris, who was very tiny. And on her first morning with us in September, and she sat at the end and she said, I would like you all to know that when decisions have to be made, I may ask your opinion, but at the end of the day, it is my school and it will be my decision. And we were all a little bit shell-shocked, really, after Mr. Hayton. But she was very efficient. You couldn't falter on that. She gave us all a huge file and said, that is the curriculum you will teach.
Hayton had just left, I think, and it was Mrs. Morris. Yes, Mrs. Morris when I was there. So, Maggie Fairclough taught me, my brother taught me, and now she's taught his daughter as well. So
your granddaughter?
My niece. So, it's quite a
She's taught everybody.
She's taught everybody in the village,
Yeah.
that's right. But it's quite weird working at school that, I remember sitting in here and all the teachers that I had and which ones I enjoyed better and which ones I hated and all the bits like that. So it's quite strange working at the school.
I remember I did gymnastics from quite a young age. We had a teacher called Mrs. Smith. She was a really, really small lady, and she used to do our gymnastics. And I remember winning the gymnastic competition, which was a real big surprise at the time. That was really good. We did inter-school quizzes, so we went over to Fradley and we did quizzes like that, which was good. So there's quite a few things that were.
And then I had 2 little boys that wouldn't stay at dinner time. They didn't like coming home. They didn't like staying at school dinners. Bless them. And they wanted to. They run off home, and so one of the girls went and fetched them back. And one day, I must tell you this because it's such a joke, it's stuck in my mind. One of the girls said to me, give him one of them blue plates. We got blue plates and white plates. All the kids had white plates, but they've got a few blue ones, you see, and blue dishes. And I said to these 2 lads, 2 brothers there was. I don't know what their names were. I said, would you eat your dinner if Mrs. Greenleaf put it on a blue plate? Yeah, and they never run away again.
I can remember Mrs. Faircliffe was class 1, Miss Nadine was 2, Miss Rowe was 3.
Oh, yes, I remember Mrs. Rowe.
Mrs. Bickley did 4, Mrs. Jones did 5, Mrs. Green did 6, Mrs. Smith did 7, 8 was Mrs. Bates, 9 was Mrs. Hayton, and 10 was Mr. Shears.
Lyle was what you might call a culture shock after Mrs. Morris. Whereas if you went into Mrs. Morris's room, there would be one file on the table, or one sheet of paper she was dealing with. When you went into Lyle Haddon's room, there was a whole heap of papers, and he could never find what he wanted. And he had a system, did Lyle, that every so often he would clear his desk into the bin, because if it was important, they'd write again.
And I hated class 2, and all the classes have changed now, but class 2 used to have a raised area, a dais, and we used to have to sit on it every morning for registration. I hated it with a passion, and when we did one of the jobs at the school, we had to rip it out, and I had so much fun with the lads pulling this dais area out, because I used to sit on there every morning and hate it with a passion. Cried. I just hated school with a passion. So it was great fun that we were ripping out a bit of where I spent some of my life that caused me so much pain.
He was a very quiet boy, always very polite, very quiet, did as he was told, never put a foot wrong. But it was always very obvious that he wasn't that wasn't his favourite place to be, shall we say. But he was certainly not, he wasn't disruptive or anything. He was one of those children who knew he'd got to come to school and he put up with it.
I was quite a while cooking proper dinners, what I call proper dinners, and then they introduced a thing that you put with the mince. It was, I don't know, I don't know whether it was soya or something. It was in the shape of mince, in a bag, and, well, I don't know whether I ought to say this, you know. I used to put it in the dustbin because I wouldn't give it to them.
I took the reception class. Our topic had been dinosaurs, and I took them to Matlock Bath, because next to Gulliver's Kingdom was a big dinosaur park, which was, I'd been to look at it, and I knew it would be good. But as part of the day, we went to Gulliver's Kingdom as well, and had a wonderful day. It was a day very hot and sunny, and on the way home, it was very quiet on the coach. And because it was very quiet, I went down the coach, and every child was fast asleep, everyone, and they slept all the way home.
Because you couldn't, you see, I had to mince my own meat and all that sort of thing. There was nothing, it weren't brought in on a tray for me. The butcher would bring it in a lump. I used to have to bone everything, bone the meat. If we had lamb stew, I used to have to bone all the legs. And
in I would say the first 20 years of my teaching, nobody ever watched me teach. Apart from the first year, somebody came in, an inspector came in. And never watched me teach, and that's the difference.
My time, you want to know, it was 8 till 3, and I used to go down there at 7:15, so those kids could have a proper cooked dinner.
Yes, it was Liz Bates and Pat Shear and I, and Liz was one of those inspirational teachers who just made a connection with children. When my son went into her class, I wasn't sure how he'd cope with Liz because he was quite quiet. And when he came home the first day, I said, how do you get on with Mrs. Bates? Oh, he said, she's great. And she said she can shout louder than you. So that was it. She'd made a hit with him. And Liz wanted to do the drama. She was very good at drama. She would write our Christmas plays. Pat Shear was one of the most inspirational teachers I've ever seen. He was an amazing man. He got the results, but he had the relationship with the children. And we decided, there was talk about, because Quentin and I were involved in the drama, about having a drama club. Well, we ran it on a Saturday morning, because you couldn't do it after school in those days. We ran it on a Saturday morning. And it wouldn't be allowed nowadays. We'd take the children over Witchner Fields and all sorts of places. And John Colston got involved, which I'm sure you've got on the film. It was in the early days of video cameras. Do you remember when there were huge things? And the school got one. We got a video camera, and so I think it was Pat Shear who wanted to do who was keen to film it, and of course the children thought it was wonderful.
I go in the butcher's now, and if I say, I go, and if Adrian's there, he'll say, oh, this woman, she used to make some lovely steak and kidney pies. That's what I get wherever I go.
It has it's changed tremendously. Not all for the better. I think it's harder. I think it's a much harder job now. And I do think, I strongly believe that side of the teaching, which is a craft, they all know the science. You know, they know how to plan, they know what all the standards are and all these sorts of things. But there's the other side of teaching, which is a craft and which is about children.